Ready to shine on plenty of hoops action Tuesday night. And you mentioned it, Nets Suns, 128-124. Nets win thanks to James Harden in that game winner with 30 seconds to play. He had a big night, and he had to, Gary, because he was riding solo. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving both down with injury. This puts the Nets in a great position, at least at the moment, in the Eastern Conference standings. So biggest takeaway from this game was what?
Just an incredible performance from James Harden. I mean, you are on the road against a good team down 24 points, and you come back and win it. That's incredible, and it was because of James Harden. You know, in the previous 4 games, he was averaging 14 field goal attempts per contest. But then there's no Kevin Durant, there's no Kyrie Irving. He goes up to 22 shots, gets 38 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds. And it's just a reminder that, if I'm being honest, I was wrong. I was a little skeptical that James Harden would, quote, work in Brooklyn, but it's working well. He's a willing passer when he's playing with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, leading the NBA in assists. And then on the nights where you don't have Kyrie or Kevin, or in this case both, he can go back to Houston James Harden and just dominate the game. Most important thing in the NBA, you're trying to win a title, is star power. Nobody has the star power that Brooklyn has right now. They've got to figure some things out on the defensive end. But when all those guys are healthy and if they guard a little, they look like a real threat to win a world championship.
There is the aspect to that, Gary, though, that they just haven't spent a lot of time together on the court for a variety of reasons, and we hope that we get to see that over a long period of time to create a sample size that allows us to truly evaluate, hey, do these three work well in conjunction with one another and in those moments, those critical moments? Because last night we saw James Harden was completely comfortable putting that team on his back because that's what he's done. I want to throw this at you, though, because LeBron James was asked about this Nets group and the idea of a super team. And look, LeBron built that in Miami, so he's responsible for that being a question at this point. But he kind of put out the, hey, let's push the brakes here a little bit because let's not forget about KD, Steph, and Clay from a few years ago. What do you take from LeBron's comments there?
I think it's fair, you know, because though Brooklyn does have real star power, I don't know that they're a star team yet. Again, some real issues on the defensive end of the court. But you mentioned LeBron's super team in Miami. If you remember when LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh first started playing together, it took them a little while to figure out who was going to do what and when. Ultimately, they got it figured out, won 2 championships. So there is some real value to being patient with Brooklyn, and you're exactly right. Those 3 guys do need to be on the court more often in the regular season to get comfortable with each other and be ready to make a run in the postseason. But don't get it twisted. These are 3 future Hall of Famers all in the primes of their career. It is a star-studded group in Brooklyn.
The NBA trade deadline is still a month away, but rumors are already swirling, especially around Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, who are expected to be on the move at some point in the next month. Time for Gary to put on his GM hat, and we'll go through some other stars, GP, whose names have come up, at least in trade rumors. And we'll start with Bradley Beal in D.C., who leads the NBA in scoring, but has been in trade rumors for the last, it feels like, couple seasons. And a large reason would have to do with the fact that Washington's at the basement of the East and maybe a team wants to get an electrifying score.
Yeah, and that team, the franchise I'd like to see target Bradley Beal, would be the Philadelphia 76ers. You've already got Joel Embiid playing at an all-star level, MVP level. Ben Simmons looking like a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, also all-star level. The only thing they need, or at least the most obvious thing they need, is shooting, and Bradley Beal obviously provides a real off-ball threat. If you need a big 3 to compete with the Nets and challenge the Lakers, Brad Beal gives you that. He's leading the NBA in scoring right now, like you said, getting 33 points per game, and he would fit perfectly with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
How about Victor Oladipo? He's already been dealt once this year. He's part of that Harden trade. He's a 2-time All-Star, but man, I was surprised to remind myself that he's on his 4th team, but the Rockets are fading out of contention. Is there a team where he would be a nice final piece maybe to make a run?
Yeah, I think so. Victor, like you said, has bounced around a little bit, but he is still a high-level player. And obviously, Houston is more thinking future now than present. Oladipo on an expiring deal would make sense to flip him for assets. Maybe Denver Nuggets could look this direction and try to add another big piece. If you're Denver, you've already got Nikola Jokic playing at an MVP level, but it's not translating to wins. You've got Jamal Murray. You've got Michael Porter Jr. If you could add Oladipo by offering, I don't know, Gary Harris and whatever else you have to offer to get a deal done, it would make some sense because Oladipo with these other three, it would give Denver perhaps a top four as good as anybody in the NBA.
Kyle Lowry's not on a lot of these trade rumors lists, but at 34 years old, obviously it's more of an immediate gain, but he's a six-time All-Star, Gary. Is there a contender that could use his services?
I think there is, and I think it's the Los Angeles Clippers. You know, if you're Toronto, you've got Fred VanVleet, you've got Malachi Flynn. In a season that's off to a rough start, it's okay for the Raptors to move on from Kyle Lowry. He is on a $30 million expiring contract. He's not a part of the future. Meantime, the Clippers are weak at point guard. They're basically all in right now on this season. Was the Paul George trade worth it or not? That'll largely be determined by how this season turns out, by whether the Clippers win a title or not. Kyle Lowry, already an NBA champion like Kawhi Leonard, he could help the Clippers win a title. So Los Angeles, they'd be wise to at least consider adding him, obviously, if the price is right.
This next guy I find really fascinating because to me, you can have the big picture view and the immediacy in mind when it comes to Zach LaVine. Obviously drafted by the Timberwolves. He's now with the Bulls. He's averaging 28 points per game, but he's never been a part of a team that's been in contention or been able to make a run. Does he have a value beyond just able to put up points in games that don't necessarily matter to a team that's in that playoff push?
I think he does. I mean, I understand your point that, you know, it's big numbers for usually bad teams, but he's looking like a 25-year-old star right now. And the New York Knicks would be an interesting landing spot for him. You know, we're 40% through the regular season for the Knicks, and, you know, they're 6th in the East right now on a 3-game winning streak. Julius Randle's playing like an all-star. R.J. Barrett has made a second-year leap. Emmanuel Quickley has been one of the great surprises of this rookie class. Knicks fans are excited. And you can add to it by adding an exciting player like Zach LaVine, who is averaging 28 points per game, shooting 43% from three. If you're New York, identify the young pieces you want to keep and offer whatever else you have to offer to get this done. You've got something interesting happening right now. Let's try to turn it into something that becomes one of the bigger stories in the NBA.
Gary, so let's start with best freshman this season.
You know, if you would have asked this question maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think most people would have said Cade Cunningham at Oklahoma State. Right now, the correct answer seems to be Evan Mobley at USC. He's a 7-foot forward who has forever been considered a likely one-and-done top 5 pick. He's done nothing to disappoint, averaging 16.6 points, 9.0 rebounds per game for a USC team that's alone atop the Pac-12 standings. He's leading the Pac-12 in rebounds per game, in blocks per game. Just a special, special talent. And yes, I think a real threat to not only be the National Freshman of the Year, but also go #1 in the 2021 NBA draft.
And he's got a great first name, so he's got a lot going for himself here. Best defensive player.
There's a lot of options here. You could go Herb Jones at Alabama. You could go with Davion Mitchell at Baylor, but I'll actually go with Davion Mitchell's teammate at Baylor, and that is Mark Vidal. He is a 6'5", 250-pound forward/guard who's quick enough to guard on the perimeter, strong enough to handle bigs. He can really guard all 5 positions. He blocks shots on the perimeter. He blocks shots at the rim. He's the main reason I think Baylor is top 5 right now in adjusted defensive efficiency for the 2nd straight season. He barely scores, but the Bears are 17-0, and Mark Vidal undeniably is one of the biggest reasons.
I love that pick. All right, this is where you could have some debate. Best overall player, give us your selection, obviously, but maybe also a couple names that were right below whoever you have slotted here.
What's interesting, if you were trying to put together a first-team All-America team right now, I think 4 of the players are just completely obvious picks. It's Jared Butler at Baylor, it's Ayo Dosunmu at Illinois, it's Corey Kispert at Gonzaga, and then it is the guy I think would be the player of the year right now, Luka Garza at Iowa. Luka Garza entered this season projected as the National Player of the Year, and he has lived up to expectations, averaging 24.5 points, 8.4 rebounds, shooting 56% from the field, 43% from three. He's got the highest player efficiency rating in the nation. He is why Iowa has the nation's best offense, ranked number 1 in adjusted offensive efficiency. There is, like I said, competition for National Player of the Year. The other 3 guys I mentioned, plus Drew Timme at Gonzaga, maybe even Evan Mobley at USC. But right now, if you were trying to identify one player, it still has to be, I think, Luka Garza at Iowa.
I feel like Coach of the Year, Gary, this year encompasses even more, just with the challenges these programs are facing for all the obvious reasons. So beyond maybe just record, why do you have who you have at Coach of the Year?
Well, I would go with Mark Few at Gonzaga. I think the reasons why are obvious based on this season. He's got the undefeated number 1 ranked team in America. But if you wanted to go big picture, this guy has built a national power in men's college basketball at a small private school in Spokane, Washington. I mean, it makes no sense on any level, and it should not be taken for granted. He has coached in 20 straight NCAA tournaments. He's literally never missed the NCAA tournament. He's coached multiple top-ranked teams, coached in the national title game, and this, any way you measure it, is his best team, and it is the favorite to win the national championship. At this moment, Mark Few deserves any and all Coach of the Year awards. Nobody is doing a better job at running the program they're hired to run than Mark Few at Gonzaga.
So you tipped your hand there that Gonzaga is your national championship favorite as we sit here in February. But if you were to look at their most obvious challengers, maybe, who would they be?
Well, obviously Baylor also sitting here undefeated. Ohio State, Michigan also in the top 4. Illinois with Kofi Cockburn and Ayu Dosunmu playing a high level of basketball right now. I could certainly see them winning 6 games in the NCAA tournament and cutting nets in Indianapolis. But the favorite to win the national championship, it is Gonzaga. This is a team that has run through basically everybody. They are 20-0 with wins over West Virginia, Iowa, Kansas, and Virginia. Sportsline recently simulated the NCAA tournament 10,000 times. Gonzaga won it more often than anybody else, 31% of the time. Top 5 in both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Multiple future first-round NBA draft picks in Jalen Suggs and Corey Kispert. Great coach, great players. The Zags' adjusted efficiency margin right now is plus 37.48. And I understand that without context, that won't mean anything to most people. But just know if the season ended today, it would be the highest adjusted efficiency margin in the history of the KenPom database that dates back to 2002. This is an awesome, awesome team, and I really do believe Gonzaga is about to be the first undefeated national champion since Indiana in 1976.
Strong statement. You're throwing a lot of math at me. I'm trying to follow along, but one thing I do know now is that Gonzaga's good, and it's the one thing they're waiting for is that national championship. We'll see there in a few months. So let's shift to college hoops, Gary. We have a bit more clarity right now with the Baylor Bears. They're slated to resume play February 23rd. So this will be a 6-game hiatus due to COVID protocols. And we saw as recent as Sunday what Michigan was able to do after their long break away from competitive action. So as well as Baylor, do you think they would have a similar production or performance, I should say, when they do resume things? Will they get to their standard quickly?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Michigan, because what we saw on Sunday is after the Wolverines were off for 23 days, they came back and they were really rusty in that first half. Got going in the second half and was able to win a road game against Wisconsin, which was a quality opponent. But it was tighter than it probably should have been because they were working some things out in those first 20 minutes. I say all that to say this. Baylor gets to return against Iowa State, literally the worst team in the Big 12, or at least one of the 2 worst teams in the Big 12. So Baylor can afford to shake some rust off and still not be threatened before they get Kansas and West Virginia later on in the week. And so it is an ideal situation for Scott Drew, almost like having an exhibition before you hop right back in to your real Big 12 schedule. And so I do think, whether it's in the first half against Iowa State, second half, or later in the week, once Baylor returns, Baylor will be great again, and it'll be nice to watch the team that's been ranked second all season, back on the court.